fundamental role in that. But now we see that cannabinoids are regulating everything: our cardiovascular system, digestive, endocrine, excretory, immune, musculoskeletal, nervous, reproductive, respiratory. And essentially all age-related diseases are results of imbalances in the balancing acts that emerge as natural processes from this far from equilibrium thermodynamics. So, with endocannabinoids regulating everything, what kinds of unusual new phenomena, wholes that are greater than the sum of the parts, might we expect to occur? And on an individual level, ultimately, these things are contributing to health. It's not a single little pathway, which tends to be the way Western medicine is trying to dissect things, but it's a much more holistic pathway where things are all dynamically interacting and creating a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. And in terms of the mind-body connection, it's potentially, I think the cannabinoid system is really responsible for the placebo effect. So that's something that will have to be looked at. Up until about 100 years ago, the leading cause of death in, quote, civilized societies was infectious diseases. Today we die from age-related diseases. Well, cannabinoids are essentially anti-aging drugs. They help prevent and slow down the progress of age-related illnesses. We've outlawed it. Duh. So they have a very protective impact on things like cardiovascular disease, neurological dysfunction, autoimmune diseases, and as we just heard, how they can kill a whole number of cancer cells under a variety of experimental conditions. And even though we've known about this for 30 years, 40 years, we're just now starting to get it into humans in some clinical work with the help of wonderful people's work like Manuel Guzman's. So cannabinoids facilitate man's interaction with his environment. They counteract stress on a subcellular level. This has to do with the free radicals again. And on up the organizational complexity. And what I'm suggesting is it goes beyond the level of an individual and actually includes social consciousness. So free radicals are the friction of life, and endocannabinoids are the oil of life. And I would say they're also the oil of society. And kind of to verify this anti-aging property, this is a slide from Andrea Zimmer's work a while back in 1999. And what you see over here is that knockout mice of the CB1 receptor are dying at a much more rapid rate than the wild type or the heterozygous mice, so mice that either have both of their intact CB1 genes or have only one. This tells you need an intact cannabinoid system, yet the system part that gets you high, you need that for life. And the corollary experiment of this was done at the NIH at around the same time, because they're always trying to show how bad marijuana is, so they did long-term studies of injecting high doses of THC into mice and rats, and unfortunately for the warriors, the conclusion was that the mice lived longer and had fewer tumors. So endocannabinoids have played an increasing role in man's evolutionary history. Where are we going? How is it possible that cannabis is classified as having no medical value? I mean, this is lunacy. You got 1 million people in a democracy saying, hey, this makes me feel better, it helps me. You got science that agrees with them. You got 5,000 years of history, and yet it's illegal? What's wrong with this situation here? What is the influence of cannabinoids on the behavior of populations? So there was an experiment done by Lichtman a while back with the water maze. You take the knockout mice, so they don't have their CB1 receptor. You put them in a maze that's in water. Mice don't like water. They freak out, they swim around, they find a platform. You can do this with the normal mice, or you can do it with the wild type mice, the same thing. They freak out, they find a platform, they learn where the platform is, you take them out, you put them in, they go to the platform. Now you change the position of the platform. You put the mice in. They freak out, they swim around, they go to where it used to be, it's not there, they freak out, they find a new place. The normal mice, if you take them out, will go to the new place. The mice lacking cannabinoid receptors only go to the old place. They cannot relearn. They're stuck in their way of thinking. Can we extend that to humans? I would say yes. So I call them blips, backwards-looking people, as opposed to flips, forward-looking people. And essentially, it's that's responsible for what I call the biology of democracy, the balance of blips and flips. Now, in a population, there will intrinsically be those who have above-average endocannabinoid levels, and particularly with respect to open-mindedness, because that's what we're really looking at here, the ability to relearn, to take in new information and adjust, marijuana has medical value. Let's get on with it already, you know? So, in a population, there will intrinsically be those who have above average and those who have below average. And, you know, you can make some guesses as to what might be the case here. I, in fact, think that our president is the equivalent of a knockout mouse. So neurocognitive correlate, and this is an article that came out right after I presented this, actually at the HempFest last year, neurocognitive correlates of liberalism and conservatism. And this is a paper that basically shows that there's a fundamental difference in the way conservatives versus liberals think. And it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. The whole concept is whether you're open-minded or not. And what they've shown that it has to do with a variety of anterior cingulate activity, and that's an area that's also endowed with a lot of cannabinoid receptors. So this kind of supports my whole contention. So what are the real consequences of that? Come on. Lower endocannabinoid levels impair relearning, which I call open-mindedness. Higher levels promote open-mindedness, and hence the ability to adapt to a changing environment. In other words, reduce stress, adapt and change. So, the hypothesis is that blips, backward-looking people, endocannabinoid deficient people, more primitive people, they intrinsically will agree with one another because they're looking at what already happened. That's the way they look. They don't like to look forward because in the future you don't know what's going on and you might have to make some changes. You might have to adapt, but if you don't have the biochemical machinery to adapt, then that's not the way you're thinking. You know, you can either look forward, you can look in the present and experience the now, or you look backwards. So all I'm saying is there's a shift in the distribution of where your views are coming from as a function of how cannabinoid endowed or not you are. So blips gain power by having a greater degree of consensus. The consensus is derived from the fact that they're looking backwards. Of course you can agree more on what's already happened than if you're going to project into the future, where what you would do is tend to agree to disagree. Cooperativity, okay? So blips are overrepresented in government because they gain power because they're looking backwards. You know, this is so incredible because man's impact on his environment now demands that we be able to make changes, that we take in new information and we adapt accordingly. The very survival of mankind may be dependent on us making this kind of shift away from having so-called leaders who can't lead because they're looking backwards. Leadership means you go into the future and you take new things and you come up with new ideas and you work together to accomplish something special, something emerging out of, you know, non-linear relationships, new concepts. So, conclusion, a higher level of endocannabinoid activity in the human biochemical distribution in the biosphere may be necessary to prevent human extinction. Mankind is engaged in a great genetic battle between more primitive, less cannabinoid endowed individuals and those with more robust cannabinoid systems. We need them both. That's the way nature works, balance of opposing forces. But you want to shift things away from where it's been to something new that will provide us with new opportunities and new options for survival. A new paradigm for leadership is necessary. The role of leaders should be to promote positive change. You know, there's no antonym to leaders. To leadership. There's no antonym. I propose our government is the antonym. They are the opposite of leadership. Mankind cannot genetically evolve fast enough to adapt to the changes and the impact that we're having on the environment to generate the level of open-mindedness that we require. Therefore, cannabis prohibition must end.